Welcome to this tutorial on how to create this procedural grunge texture. I'm going to walk you through the process of creating this texture in Blender, and I'll try to explain my thought process along the way. We'll be using procedural techniques, which means we won't need to rely on pre-made images or textures, and instead we'll be creating everything from scratch using a node-based workflow inside the shader editor. By the end of this tutorial, you should have a solid understanding of how to create your own unique and realistic grunge texture. And this is the node group that I'm going to show you how to create. If you like my tutorials and you want to support me, I have a Patreon page where you can donate a small amount of money each month. And in exchange, you get access to all the blend files of the tutorials that I do on here, as well as a few extra blend files that I've created over the years. The link is in the description. To set up my scene, I'm going to switch to the Cycles render engine. You can use Eevee if you want, but I like the way that Cycles looks a bit better. I'm also going to switch to GPU compute. If you don't have that option, don't worry. That just works a bit better for my system. And then under render, I'm going to switch the noise threshold to 0.1. That's going to make it render a bit faster. I'm going to split the screen in half here and switch the left side to the shader editor. And we've got that material that's just on the default cube. Let's just leave it on there. I hit N to get rid of that shelf on the right, and I'm going to hit T in this window to get rid of that shelf on the left. To make sure we can see the changes over here, while you're hovering over the 3D viewport, hold down Z and move your mouse up to go into rendered mode. And then any changes you make here will show up in real time right here. While in the shader editor, I'm going to hit Shift A and click on Search to add a new node. I'm going to search for Wave and just select Wave Texture there. If we click this and hit Control Shift and left click, we'll get a preview of this. And if that's not working, it just means you don't have Node Editor enabled. So go to Edit, Preferences, click on Add-ons, and then search here, Node, and make sure there's a check right here in this box next to Node Wrangler. I'm going to X out of here, and while this is highlighted here, the wave texture, hit Control T, and that's another Node Wrangler shortcut. It's going to bring up your texture coordinate and mapping node. I'm going to switch the output from the generated to the object there on the texture coordinate. So I've got this setting distortion on the wave texture, and if I move that up, we can see it kind of distorts these, kind of like a noise texture being applied here. I'm going to go back to 0. What I want is actually, the spaces between these lines to be different. And one way I can do that is just by bringing in a separate XYZ node, placing it here, and then just activating this distortion again. And now if I move this, you can see different thicknesses and different spaces between these lines here. So I'm going to set the distortion at, let's say, 15.6, I think is what my original value was. And this scale here is going to be 10.5. So if we look at the way that this is being mapped, we can see that it doesn't appear on two of these faces. Kind of fix that with the rotation here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to 60 degrees on the Z axis there. And let's do something with the Y too, maybe something like 30, a little bit less. And now we've got slants on all the faces here. I want to create patches in this wave texture, so I'm going to do that creating a mask using the noise texture. And I'll just create a duplicate of this mapping node with Shift D and then hit backspace to return it to its default values. And let's just go ahead and plug object into the vector there. And let's look at this noise texture while we're creating it. I'm going to bring in a color ramp as well. And let's set the scale to 1, so it's quite large. And I'll just bring up this black and bring down this white just so we can see it while we're creating it. And the detail, I'll go to 8. And the roughness, I'm going to increase to 1, so we can see it's much more grainy now. And the black value on this color ramp, I'm going to set to 0.427, and the white is going to come down to 0.45. So we can see mostly white, just a little bit of black there. And I'm going to bring in a mix RGB, place it here, and this is going to run into into the factor. And this wave texture is going to go into color 1, and I'm going to set that bottom color to white. So we can see we've really interrupted that wave texture now, especially with that graininess. It looks very different. I'm going to repeat that process by grabbing these 3 nodes and hitting Control-Shift-D so that we duplicate them while keeping them attached to this texture coordinate node. I'm going to duplicate this mix RGB as well. Just place it right here so that this mix RGB is going into color 1. And then this is going to go into the factor again. We're just going to change things on this noise texture and color ramp. So starting with the noise texture, we'll go 7.5 for the size there, the scale, And then we'll reset the roughness to 0.5. And this color ramp here, I'm going to bring the black up to 0.541. And the white is going to come down to 0.605. So we can see that new texture. Basically, most of that wave texture is now masked out. I'm going to make an incision at the beginning here with holding shift and right clicking and dragging through there, and it just creates a node there so we can control this a bit better. Let me do that. So you can also just create single ones and then just move them around with G and then just left click when you're done positioning them. And I'm also going to create a frame around all of these nodes here and just go Control J, so that creates this frame here. Then if you click at the top there and drag it around, you can name it. So this is going to be, we can just call it whatever. I'll call it wave texture with masks. So, just trying to be descriptive there, I guess. And we're just going to grab everything here and go Control-Shift-D. So move that down here. We're going to create a duplicate of that group there. If you want to move these around, just grab this top area there. And yeah, you can also drag your mouse across, but it won't always select it. You need to select this area up here. I'm going to get the preview going here by holding down Control, Shift, and left clicking there. And we're just going to change some things on these noise and color ramp values. So we'll start with this noise. I'm going to actually change it to 4D, and we'll leave the W at 0. I'm going to change the scale to 5, and that looks good. We'll leave everything else as is. And for the black, I'm going to go 0.409, and the white on the color ramp is going to go 0.436. For this second noise texture, let's also change it to 4D so we have a W value there. I'm not going to use it for now, but it basically just gives me a new version of that old noise texture there. So I'm going to change the scale on this one to 5.9, and the detail, we'll leave it 8, and the roughness, I'll leave it 1. So pretty similar, just a different scale on this one. And the color ramp, let's go ahead and change this black to 0.459. And the white is going to go to 0.477. Lastly, with this wave texture, we're just going to change the Y and the Z rotation here. We'll go, instead of 30 and 60, we'll go 50 and 80. And for the scale here, let's change it to 23.5 and 14.1 for the scale and distortion, respectively. Instead of the 80 value, let's go to something like 30. Then it's still going to be different from the original one, but it won't be quite so different on the different faces there. I might just go ahead and name these as well. So these are both masks. I'll just rename them both at the same time. We'll call these masks, and I guess we'll just make sure that that's still in this group. There we go. So just came out for a second. And I'll do the same thing here. Accidentally grabbed too much. There we go. Control J, and then we'll rename this masks and just drop it back in that group again. There we go. And if we hit N, we can bring up this shelf here, and maybe I'll just go like that so it's a different color so you can see it a bit better. And you can do the same thing with this wave texture as well, or whatever you want. I'm going to grab everything we've set up so far in both of these node groups and hit Control Shift D, duplicate everything there. And yeah, I'll just make kind of a reroute here as well. We'll just make one there, like this in the middle. And so we'll have two wave textures up here. We're going to change it up down here. I'm just going to reset both of these mapping nodes so we've got those angles on, and we'll go from there. That's backspace is that shortcut. Let's also talk about as well how we're going to combine these top two textures. So we've got this one here and we've got this one here. What we can do is we can think about what would work the best, or even just try something and just see how it works. But I think a multiply node, just a regular mask set to multiply, is going to work pretty well because it's just going to carry the black values over. 0 times whatever is going to be 0. So let's try that out anyways and just see how it works. I think that looks pretty good. Now we've got both of those wave textures combined on all the faces. So let's look at this, these new node groups that we've set up here. Not really set up, we've just copied them. We're going to set them up here. So let's start by changing this so they don't have these separate XYZ nodes. I'm just going to grab it, hold down Alt, and just left click and drag it off. And that way the noodle remains intact there. And we can even grab this wave texture and go Shift S, and that actually changes this texture. It's a little bit more annoying because you can't search, but I know what I'm going for anyway. So I'm just going to go to Texture and go to Musgrave. And now it's going to be a Musgrave texture. And let's look at this while we're creating it as well. So I'm going to set this Musgrave scale to 10. And let's actually just look at just the Musgrave here for a second. So the detail is going to be at 8. And the dimension is going to be 0.1. And the lacunarity I'll leave at 2. And yeah, let's look at this first mask here. So we're just going to set the noise texture to 4 for the scale, 4.4 for the detail. Roughness will leave at 1. And you know what, actually, I made a mistake here. So this is going to be 4D. So the W is actually going to be 4. And the scale is 4.4. The detail is still 8, and the roughness is 1, just like this. And the color ramp, we'll set that black to 0.459. Actually, that was the same as what it was before. And the white is going to be 0.468. Then this top noise texture here, this is going to be a scale of, you know what, actually, again, it's 4D. The W value is 7.5. The scale is 1.4. The detail is 8. And roughness and distortion are just normal. And then we're going to go to the black on this color ramp and set it to 0.409. And the white is going to be 0.414. So yeah, we can see this first mask, and then this second mask here removes even more. So you know, this noise texture being a smaller scale means larger shapes. So it's basically blocking out larger portions of it at that point. Change this title here. So I'm going to hit F2 and I'll just go Musgrave. Okay, let's look at this last one here. Just going to get rid of this altogether and go Musgrave, and we'll bring that in, and I'll just connect this up again just into color 1. And we're going to look at this Musgrave texture first. Go ahead and focus in on it. And this is going to be a 4D texture, which gives us a W value, which I am going to leave at 0. And we're going to go scale of 10, detail of 8, and dimension of 0.1. It's just an easy way, settings like this basically, especially these three, to get a quick gritty texture. We'll look at this noise texture here, the bottom of the two masks, and I'm going to set the W value is going to be 4, the scale is going to be 4.4, and then 8 and 1. I think that might have been pretty much what we had before. Anyways, this top one here is going to be 9, and then 1.4, and then 8. And this color ramp here will go, actually let's take a look at this color ramp here first, and we'll take a look at the mask while we're doing it as well. And the black is going to be 0.459, and the white is going to be 0.755. So a bit softer on that color ramp, makes a lot more black in that end value there. And then we're going to look at that last mask here, which again is a lower frequency, so it's going to be masking out more of this. And the black is going to be set to 0.391, and the white is going to be 0.468, just like this. So now to add these together, we're just going to use a few more math notes. And so starting with this one here, I'll switch those around. And we'll connect everything up with a math multiply node as well. And there we go. We've got all 4 of those textures multiplied together. And you know, it looks pretty good. It looks like a grungy, gritty texture. And now we'll feed it into this principled BSDF and just see what it looks like. The lighting's not great. I'll just do a quick shortcut to fix that. Go to World Properties and add an HDRI by clicking on that yellow circle next to color, going to Environment Texture, going Open, navigate to where you got some HDRIs. I've got some free ones from Polyhaven here, and I'm just going to go with a quick interior one, then go to Visibility, Ray Visibility, and unclick Camera. So it lights my scene, but doesn't appear in the background. Let's also add a modifier to make it look slightly better. I'm going to add a bevel modifier, and we'll just go something like 0.01 and maybe 3, and then you could also go maybe shade smooth or shade auto smooth. So let's try setting it up with some color here now, and to do that I'm going to bring in a color ramp and just place it here, and we'll actually have 3 of these. So I'm just going to hit Control-Shift-D to duplicate it while leaving it attached to that multiply node, and we'll just adjust these 3 color ramps for the color, the roughness, and even the normal. So in fact, let's bring in a bump node as well. Just place it right here. This is going to go into the height. So this top color ramp, the first color I had it, that was black there, and the white I'm going to change that to hex code FFB467, which is kind of an orange color there, and that's going to go into the base color. And this second color ramp, I'm just going to flip it so that the white is on the bottom and the black is on the top, and I'm going to feed this into the roughness. So just thinking about what this is doing, 1 is going to be rough, and white or 1 is going to be rough, or black or 0 is going to be very smooth. So that's what the roughness map looks like. So when we see that, you see the way the light interacts with it. Some spots are rough, most spots are very smooth. Let's think about that again. So this is the rough area here, which is actually the dark area. So all the dark areas are less smooth, and all the other areas are very smooth and shiny. And then this last one here, the bump one, I'm just going to leave that as is, and I'm going to change the strength to 0.2 instead. And we can even preview what that's going to look like here. And then we'll feed that into the normal. Let's take a look at this final material. I'm thinking it's too reflective here, so let's take this black here and move it to something in the middle, maybe. We can even see the value, 0.199 rather, or the hex code as we're going up. Give us a better idea of where we are. And let's always look at the light as well, just to see how that's reflecting. It's going to be helpful. I like this, so I landed on hex code 888888, just a bunch of 8s. So let's do one more color here. I'm going to duplicate this material and just move it over here. And let's grab this one here. I'm going to hit this button right here for a new material that keeps this node group. And I'm going to create one more of these nodes. Let's move this down. I'm going to move this color ramp up here. So we've got 4 color ramps now, and I'm just going to reset this one. Could probably also call this first one Grunge, and this one here, let's just call it Grunge 2. For this top color ramp here, the one that's going to be the main color, I'm going to change the hex code to 548C83, just kind of a bluish color there. And the top one here, the orange one there, let's change that hex code to 99FFEF, which is a much lighter bluish color there. And this second color ramp, this is actually going to be our metallic value, which I'm going to leave at the default of black on the bottom, white on the top. And we'll feed that into the metallic node right here, metallic input rather. And that's going to be, when it's 1 or white, it's going to be metallic. When it's black, it's going to be dielectric or non-metallic. So we can see that here, we got metallic and then non-metallic right there. For this color ramp that's feeding into the roughness, I'm going to change that second color to, it's a gray color, so it's going to be a sequence of 3 of the same characters, 9B, 9B, 9B. And that's just a little bit less shiny than it was before. And the color ramp, I'm just going to leave as is. That looks good. So here we have kind of a metallic / non-metallic material. Why don't we make one more as well? So I'll just move it up here. We'll hit this button, and we'll call this Grunge 3. Let's see what we can come up with here. I'm going to adjust this top color ramp here. Let's go with the bottom flag. I'm going to change this to hex code 8C4272. And this top one here, I'm going to change it to FF8357. And let's get rid of this metallic right here, so it's all non-metallic. And there's the color ramp I was copying from. And I'm going to change the transmission here, because the transmission roughness, we can adjust that too. Looks pretty interesting. Maybe even let's go like this, create a new color ramp for the transmission for roughness here. Yeah, it looks pretty interesting. Maybe even get rid of this roughness one here and just go full super smooth. Maybe not. Kind of like this a bit better. But let's go darker right here. And that's good. The reflection's a little distracting. You can even change that by going, the glossy from the room is no longer reflecting off of everything. So it doesn't look quite the same, but it does help if that's kind of distracting. Now I just go like this too, just back that off slightly, then the reflection won't be quite as bad. Let's talk about this texture. This texture is basically 4 different patterns mixed together, and each pattern is mixed using these math nodes that are set to multiply. There's one there, there's one there, and there's one down here. And this works especially well when each of these individual patterns isn't too dark, because this multiply is basically going to make things darker. All these values are between 0 and 1, and so when they multiply, they're all going to get smaller. None of them are going to get any larger. So if you have too many dark patterns, this multiply mixing won't work very well. This is what our first pattern looks like here. Barely any dark areas. This is our second pattern, just another wave texture in another direction. Then we've got these 2 different Musgrave textures here that are mixed together. Here's the 2 Musgrave mixed, and here's the 2 wave mixed, and then here is everything mixed together. Then when we look at each individual pattern, the bottom section here is just the principal pattern. So in this case, it's this wave texture. And then we mix it out, we mask it out with this first noise texture, and then mask it out with the second one as well. This first one, the way the mask works is we've got this color ramp here from this noise texture feeding into this mix RGB. Because it's going into the factor, it splits these 2 sockets here. So anywhere that there's black, that's where our noise texture, our wave texture here is going to appear from here. And then once again, we do the same thing here. The reason I mask it twice too is because this hides the noise influence a little bit, especially when the 2 frequencies are different sizes, like we have here with 7.5 and 1. With this setup too, it's easy enough to get a different iteration of the same kind of pattern just by going to one of the masks or the main texture there, and you can switch it to 4D, then change this W value around, or same thing with this one here. This one's actually going to do more of a difference because the frequency is larger there. Or you come to this one here and just maybe do phase offset or something like that. This one doesn't have a W value, but you can change it in other ways. Then once I have the overall pattern coming from this last multiply node, I can run it into different color ramps, create the color, metallic value, roughness, bump, etc., and feed it all into this principal BSDF to have a uniform pattern coming through. Okay, that just about does it for this tutorial. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. I'll do what I can to clear up any confusion you might have. Thanks for watching.